Okay, I'm going to show you a few small but really important skills to learn. And unfortunately, just because remote learning is awkward as always, even though these are little tiny things, I'm just going to have you make 3 separate files because I just think that's the best way for me to have you have evidence for me that you went through these and learned these skills because they're really, really important skills. And instead of making one file with all these different parts on it, it's just easier for me and I think for you to make 3 separate files. So the first thing we're going to do is save this first, create a new file, save this first file as Oaken, you'll, with your own last name, advanced. Okay, so call it advanced move with your last name, click save. And then I'm going to create a sketch. I'm going to make a 50 on the ground plane. I'm going to make a 50mm rectangle. So you can choose rectangle any way you want. Type R, click on the create menu, click on the what I just did, click on the ribbon, and then just start drawing a rectangle, type in 50, 50, and make a 50mm square. I'm assuming you can do this with fairly quick directions at this point, so I'm being fairly quick. Go ahead and click Finish Sketch, and you've got a 50mm square. Under Modify, choose Press Pull, and I want to pull this up 40mm, so I'm going to click on the square. You could type in Q, Modify, Press Pull under this menu, however you want. Type in 40, click OK, and now we've got a rectangular box that's 50mm square by 40mm high. Okay. So now I want to show you some cool stuff with the move command. So under modify, I'm going to choose move. And generally it's best to select the move command before you select your object that you're going to move, I think. You'll notice that as always, you could choose a face or you can even move things within a sketch. But mostly you're going to be moving an entire thing, just like you did in Tinkercad. You're not going to be resizing it, which is really what moving a face would do, or changing a sketch object. So generally you'll be using bodies. Make sure your dialog box says body right now, and then go ahead and select your box to tell it that's what you want to move. And the first thing I want to show you how to do is create a copy. So the one pitfall here, which I find to be probably one of the most annoying things in Fusion for a beginner, is if I move this box at all, this create copy gets grayed out. For some reason, they cannot engineer it. So if you move it and then you want to copy it, you can't do it that way. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out. And I'm going to type M to get my move command again and get my box. So even if you tweak it the slightest bit, this create copy is going to disappear. Okay? And you can copy and paste things, but this is much more faster and more powerful, as you'll see in a moment. So I'm going to check create copy, and then you can create a copy in whatever direction you want. You could create a copy by literally by rotating and making a copy, which would be sort of a cool thing to do. Or you could create a copy in the X direction, the Y direction. In this case, I'm just going to have you, oops, darn it, I undid and redid. I'm going to have you create copy. I'm going to have you just move it down in the X axis, down that red axis, and make a new copy. I don't really care how far away you go. And click OK. Okay, so now you've got a new copy. That's how you copy things in Fusion. The easiest way is just to move them. Sometimes you'll want a copy of something, but you won't want it to be the same size. You might want it to be like half the size. So I want to show you how the scale command works. You could resize things other ways, but this is probably the easiest way to resize things. Again, you could move faces to resize only that way, but you'll see this is much simpler. I'm going to choose Modify Scale, and again, I'm going to click on this box. Now, there's a few little intricacies to this box. One is, say I want to make this box half the size of the other box. You always do this not by typing in the size, but typing in what size it is in proportion to what it originally was. So you don't say, I want it to be 25 by 25 by 20, which would be half the size of the original box. You just type in 0.5 and it will make it half the size of the original box. The issue here is you need to tell it where you want it to scale from, because usually you probably don't want it floating in the air after you scale like this. You probably want to scale it on the ground. So that is where this point comes in. So I guess I got to cancel again just to show you that. Modify scale. Okay, so the point comes in where you're scaling from controls where it ends up. So if you want it to scale from so that it's sitting on the ground, you want to choose a point on the ground and it will scale from that point. Okay, so now if I type in 0.5, you'll see it will scale towards the point you chose. Okay, so it's always going to scale towards the point you chose, and that will help you determine where it ends up so you don't have to move it after you scale. It just saves you a little bit of time by choosing that point. Don't have to do that, but it will save you some frustration. The other thing is scale doesn't only work proportionally in all three directions. Out of the box, it usually chooses uniform. I'm pretty sure it does. So yours probably says uniform right now, but that just means it's going to scale in all three directions. You can do a non-uniform scale where you decide to only scale it in the X direction. So let's say I just do 0.5 in the X direction. So that would just chop it in half in the X direction. Or maybe you want it to be only in the Y direction, right? Or maybe you want it in the Y and the Z, but not in the X, right? So you get the idea. So this gives you more control. And as always, you know, the sliding arrows work too, but generally you're going to be given parameters. You're not going to be sliding things to make them scale. So I'm going to, I just X'd out of that. I'm going to modify scale and choose the box, and I'm going to choose this point. So I changed to point, and I'm going to scale 0.5, which is what I would like you to do. So I'd like you to have the second box be 0.5 of the first box, and to be so that it scaled away from the first box and left it on the ground. Okay, so that's your job after watching all of this. Okay, the next thing I want to show you how to do is how to align things. There is an alignment command, but I've never seen a person who uses Fusion use the align command. They generally use the move command because it's actually simpler and more powerful. So the align command, I guess, is there. I don't know why it's even there, because when you're aligning, that's what you're doing, right? You're moving things to line them up. And that's what the move command will really help you do in a powerful way. You can play with the align tool, but I'm not even going to show it to you because, like I said, I've never seen anyone who uses it. So I'm going to choose the move command. Again, M will get you there. And I wanted to show you, in order to align things, you need to use one of these choices here. So what I want to show you is, first I'm going to select the box. What I want to show you is, by default, out of the box, it brings up this move tool that has everything. It's got the rotate. It's got the arrows to slide things in the X or Y or Z axis. It's got the free move. We did this in the walkthrough where you can move things around freely. So you can play with those if you forget how to use them. But the free move tool, which should be the one that you default to, lets you do all of the different types of move. Free move, move in an arrow direction, rotate, all of those things. You can type in X distance, Y distance, Z distance. You can type in rotations to certain degrees. You can create a copy if you haven't moved it yet. Okay, the next one is translate. All this does is it just makes the tool simpler. So translate gets rid of the free move tool and the rotate tool and just leaves up the XYZ arrow move tool. And that's called translating. If you're moving something on an axis, it's called translating. So you're translating it on the axis. The rotate tool gets rid of everything But rotating, the first thing you have to do if you're using the rotate tool is tell it what axis you want to rotate on, and then it brings up that little rotate tool, and you can rotate things to your heart's to your heart's desire. Okay. This is the one I really wanted to focus on here. The point to point is what you're going to use to align things. So for instance, if I want to align this corner to that upper corner, the first thing I go to this point to point tool and I choose a point that I want to align to another point. So I'm going to choose this bottom corner, and then it automatically, you can only do one of these, so it automatically goes to the target point. I'm going to choose that upper corner, and it will just jump right to that upper corner. Okay? So that is how alignment is so powerful. And I'm going to undo that and just do another one just so you can see. Okay, so now I'm going to choose this again. I'm going to choose Modify Move. I'm going to click on here, and I'm going to change to point to point. And I notice sometimes when I do this, it lags. So it's lagging right now, but eventually it will go to point and get rid of the free move tool. And what I'd like you to do, just to make it a little more complicated, is I would like you to spin around and find the center point on the bottom of this box as your first point, and then spin around and line that up with the center point on the top of the box, and you've got them aligned at center. All right, the next thing we're going to do is create a pipe or tube. It's a pretty common thing to do in 3D design, and so it's an important command to learn. And the way it works is the way a lot of similar things work. So learning how to do that, you'll learn how to do things I don't teach you. And right now I'm just, again, filling in some gaps in your learning that the tutorials didn't cover that you will need eventually. And I want you to practice them before you're working on really complicated stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just save this as last name pipe. And the first thing we're going to do with this is we're going to make the pipe in a sine wave kind of shape. So we're going to create a sketch of the path of our pipe. Okay. So the sketch, in order to sketch a squiggly curvy line like that, you could make it up out of a lot of different arcs, but I'll show you how to use the spline tool, which is a really cool tool. So as you notice, the that sign is in a vertical orientation. So, and it will be easiest to make our pipe in a vertical orientation. So go ahead and choose that YZ plane we've been using to make things in a vertical orientation. So click on Create Sketch, choose the YZ plane, and then you are going to look under Create and go down to here where it says Spline and choose Fit Point Spline. It's the most common one. If you want to learn about the control point spline, go to the Fusion help. I'm not going to make this video super long, so I'm just going to stick with the fit point, which is the most common one. Okay, so choose that. And what it's going to do is it's going to have you lay out a series of points to draw the curve, just like you would making kind of a dot-to-dot drawing. And that's what this really is. It's like a dot-to-dot, like when you were a little kid and you made those little dot-to-dot drawings. It's basically that. So you've got to start at the origin for this one, or it won't work well for what we're doing, because we need to line things up on the origin. So make sure you start at the origin and click and let go of your mouse button, and then just move up. And you'll see the first two, when you create a second point, it's just going to make a straight line, because when there's only 2 points, it's a straight line. But it's kind of like you're putting a push pin in your drawing here. So click there, and you'll notice when you start dragging downwards, it will start curving it as if you're pulling a string around that push pin. It will start curving downwards. And depending on how complicated your line is, you put in as many points as you need. So a lot of times designers will use these to trace. So they'll import a picture onto their work plane, like which you can do in Fusion, and they'll use this to set up points to kind of trace something. So again, it's just as many points as you need. Our sine curve is relatively simple, so I'm just going to create another point at the x-axis where it cuts through the x-axis, and then another point here at the next big square, 25 millimeters, at the next big square, and then I'm just going to come up back to the x-axis and finish it up by making another point. And again, I could have made more. I could just hit enter here, or I can click on my check mark. I'm just going to hit enter. And you'll notice that when you hit enter, the fit point spline does this weird thing where it makes all these green and black dots. So these are called your control points. And the idea here is sometimes when you're tracing, you don't get it exactly right. So sometimes after you've made your spline, you want to grab one of these. And if you grab them, they will actually reshape the curve. Depending on whether you grab a green one or a black one, they work a little bit differently. It's just a way to edit your curve when you're after you've drawn. I don't think you can add more points later. You're sort of stuck with the points you have, so you'd have to redraw it if you didn't have enough points. And you don't use these a lot, but I just thought you would probably be confused and wonder what the H all those are doing there. So they're just a way for you to edit your curve after you've worked on it. Okay, so I'm done with this. I've got the path of my pipe done. And I now need to draw the cross section of the pipe, the actual, what the end of the pipe looks like. It's a 10 millimeter circle. And after all of my telling you how you need to keep everything on the same sketch in the chess piece, in this case, because they're on two different planes, they need to be on two different sketches and they will interact. The pipe command is, the sweep command is intelligent enough to understand that. So you need to finish this sketch and create a new sketch to make the cross section. So we're going to make this a pipe, and the hollow part of the pipe will be 10 millimeters in diameter. And then we're going to make the wall of the pipe about 2 millimeters. So it will be 2 on either side. And in order to do this, we are going to create a sketch. And again, we're going to create this on the ground plane. So it's perpendicular to the pipe and forms a profile. So profiles are an incredibly important part of 3D design, whether you're revolving the profiles or you're extruding the profiles. Think about the baseboards or the trim in your house, right? There's a profile there that's been extruded, or in this case, where we're actually taking a profile and sweeping the profile. And eventually we'll learn how to loft too. So we want to create a circle, and I'm gonna just make the inside diameter first of 10 millimeters. So this is the part that's going to be hollow. And then I'm going to make another circle. I'm just going to make sure it's right on that first one. And I'm going to make that 14. Okay, so I've got one circle that's going to be the hollow part and one circle that's going to be the solid wall of the pipe. And I'm going to say finish sketch. And it looks like I need to hit home to get it to swing around. Never sure why. Sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so now we're going to learn how to use this sweep command. And you can see if you look at it, it's showing you that it'll take a profile or a planar face along a selected path. So you could also take a face you've already created and sweep it along a path. In this case, we've sketched a profile, which is this outer ring, basically, little torus kind of ring that we've created. Okay, so I'm going to choose sweep. And the first thing it wants to know is the profile. So I don't want this. I don't want a solid. I want that to be the hollow. This is the profile that I wanted to sweep and make material, almost like it's extruding, but instead of just extruding straight out, it's extruding on the path of the sine curve that we created. Okay, so I'm going to select that. And you can sweep multiple profiles. So sometimes it'll start as a circle and it'll become a smaller circle and then a smaller circle, or it could even start out as a circle and end up as a triangle. There's all kinds of different possibilities. This is the most common though, where you're just sweeping something along the path and it just stays the same. So choosing one profile is all we need to do. But what we do need to do is tell it we're done choosing the profile. So as always, you got to interact with these dialog boxes and we need to tell it, yes, I'm ready to select my path. So select the path and then go ahead and click the path. And it might take a second like I did, and you might think you did something wrong, but you didn't. It's just lagging, and it will sweep that pipe right along that path. Okay? And there's some choices here. The only one that I really want to cover now is you will use this at one point is you don't always sweep it along the entire path. Sometimes you want to sweep it half the path, or in this case, it would be 3/4 of the path. It's pretty common to sweep it for the entire path, but that's what the distance is for. It's kind of like scaling your sweep. So you tell it you want it the full distance or some proportion of that full distance. And these other things, if you may end up using them at some point, again, I'm encouraging you to go to Fusion support when you want help with some of these things so I don't make these endless. Okay, so that is our pipe that has been swept. And you can just go ahead and save that, and that'll be your evidence that you understand the sweep command. And if you want to follow along and change it the way I'm about to, you could. I'll leave that up to you. But I'm going to undo the circles, and I just wanted to show you how to use the polygon tool. It's partly just to show you that, as like I said, you could sweep anything, but it'll also give me a chance to show you how to use the polygon tool. So instead of using those concentric circles to make our pipe, I'm going to make a solid polygonal object that's swept. So I'm going to, again, create a sketch on my ground plane. And like I said, you can do this or you cannot do it. If you end up with this, fine. If you end up with the pipe, that's fine too. So under create, I'm going to choose polygon, and I'm going to choose the circumscribed polygon. That's the most common one. And then it's just like drawing a circle, except a little different. So I'm going to just pull it out, and I'm going to type in 10 in diameter. And then I'm going to hit tab just to show you that I could make it out of the box. It wants to make 6. It wants to make a hexagon, but I could type in 8, or I could type in 12. And actually, the more, if you type in too many sides, it's going to practically be smooth. So up past, just like in Tinkercad, once you get past 20 sides, things print pretty smooth. So generally, you're going to be somewhere between 3 and 12 sides on something like this. I'm going to do 8. And click OK. So now I've got a 10 millimeter octagon, and I'm going to finish sketch, and I'm going to create sweep, and I'm going to choose the octagon as my profile, go over and tell it I'm ready to choose a path, and click on the pipe on the path, and I'll make this solid octagonal piece of thing. Okay, just to show you how polygons work, and also just to show you how you could choose anything as your profile. Okay, so now on to Loft. Loft is a very cool tool that you use when you want to create material. And I can't really explain it until you've seen it, maybe by looking at there. Yeah, so that's kind of like a megaphone here, where they start with a circle and end with a square. So instead of sweeping, you're lofting, and it's similar but different. You don't have a path, you have 2 profiles, and it stretches from one to the other. So I'll show you how that works. So first thing we need to do is make 2 profiles. So we are going to make pretty much what they just made there. I'm going to create a sketch, and this I'm going to draw on the ground, and I'm going to draw a circle. And let's just start with a 20 millimeter circle. Okay. And then I am going to finish that sketch. All right. So now I want to make a square that's the other end of the loft. So again, if you look at their picture, we just drew the circle at one end. I want to make a square at the other end of the loft. So you need the top and the bottom. So in order to do this, you almost always need to use the offset planes, and this is a really great time to review that, because you're going to be using that a lot all the time. And in the tutorials you're going to continue on with, you're going to use this quite a bit. So got to know how to use this one. So create offset plane, and we want to offset from the ground. So we're going to create the offset plane, and we're going to loft up 50 millimeters, 50. Okay, so click OK. And now we have a new plane where we're going to draw the top of our loft. So create sketch. And again, this is a thing where you are going to have two sketches because the loft understands that it's going from one sketch to another. You don't put them in the same sketch. So create sketch, and you don't want to choose one of your origin planes. We just created this plane because we want to use it. So go ahead and click on that. And you might have noticed that little gray square is up and to the right. It doesn't matter. You're working on that plane. That plane is infinitely large. We're now going to make a rectangle, and this also a square. And this also does allow us to learn a different rectangle tool, because here we want the rectangle to be centered on the same point as the circle. So drawing a 2-point rectangle would make us do some math, which I don't need to do right now. So instead, I can use this really nifty tool called the center rectangle. So I'm going to choose that. And I'm going to click on here. It is important you click on the origin. I'm going to click on the origin, and you'll notice as I drag outwards, it will drag it from the center out. And I want to make this 40 by tab 40, so it's bigger than my circle. So it does end up looking kind of like a megaphone. And you could go from a circle to a circle. You could go from, again, any shape to any shape. And it will do its best to stretch and gradually change from one shape to the other, which you'll see in a moment, which is why the loft command is so awesomely cool. Okay, so imagine, like, I don't know if you've ever looked in your furnace, but your furnace, when the air is coming out, it actually comes out of a square furnace usually. And the pipes in the wall and in the ceiling are all circular. So the first box that comes out, metal box that comes out of your furnace where the air comes out, starts out attached to the square and ends up attaching to a circle. So it is exactly this kind of shape. So if you're designing furnace ducts, you would really need to use this loft command. It's a great example, but awesome for so many reasons, and you'll see why. So I've got my two shapes. I clicked finish sketch. You can see how excited I am about this. And I'm going to choose loft. This is the last of the big. We've been extruding by using the push-pull command and then choosing a face. We've been revolving. We've swept. Now we're going to loft. Okay. So this one's, I'm going to pull this over. You can always pull these off and redock them if you want to, just so you can see, because it felt kind of squished. So here, the first thing you're going to choose is a profile. And I don't think it matters which one you choose first. So, and again, don't choose the origin by mistake. Okay. And then there are some choices here which affect how it stretches the material. Okay. And then we're going to choose the other profile. Okay, so you've got two profiles, and the way it stretched the material is the default way it stretches the material, which is it immediately kind of turns it into an angled object that sweeps up from the circle. Okay, so it immediately kind of starts to crease it as much as it can into corners. But these guys will change some of the ways those do, and you can fool around with that if you want, but I guarantee, again, you're going to use this and you'll have to change some of these parameters when you use it. So for now, all I really care about is you're familiar with the Loft tool, and that you're going to create two profiles and stretch the material from one to the other by choosing the two profiles. If there were other things on here, you could join it to other things. You could use it to cut material, which would be pretty awesomely cool. But we're just going to create a new body. And there is your loft. And if you want to here, you could turn off your visual style and turn it shaded. It kind of gives you a better feel of how that crease kind of gradually forms until it's a sharp corner up here at the top. Okay. And so I don't forget later, I'm going to turn that back on. Okay. And I did forget, please save this as your last name Loft.